for a period of 10 minutes with a warning bell at 8 on the topic Down the Road. Please welcome Stefano Sabatino.
When I was a child, my world was fairly small, and it stretched out as far as the end of the street. Now, the only thing that I could comprehend at that time was learning how to ride a bike. But even in that small world, there loomed a tall and profound figure. My grandpa, or as the Italians call him, nonno. He was my hero. Not in the way that comic books would articulate, but in the quiet, everyday love that I think truly did matter. He wore these red flannel shirts that smelled faintly of sawdust and peppermint, and his hands, although callous with all those years of hard work, comforted me in a way that felt safe and protected. I remember the very first day I learned to ride my bike. The sun was warm, the air smelled like crisp cut grass, and my heart was pounding with fear and excitement. I stood at the very edge of that driveway, my sweaty little palms gripping the handlebars, questioning if I was ready to accomplish such a feat down the road. But my grandpa, he was there too. He knelt down beside me, adjusted my crooked helmet, and told me with such strong conviction, "You can do this, Steph. And if you can't, I will always, always be there for you." And so he proceeded to hold the back of my seat, steadying me as I wobbled, and after a couple of steps, he gently guided me on my way. Now, I wish I could tell you that I rode off into the horizon and never looked back. But unfortunately, I did fall over within the first couple of seconds. But my grandpa, he kept good on his word. And every time I did fall over, he was there. Not to fix me or to scowl at me, but to encourage and inspire me to get back up. But roads do change. Life goes on, years pass, and my grandpa, he does get older. His hands begin to tremble, his voice softens, and that faint smell of sawdust and peppermint eventually dissipates away. And from that point on, I'm riding down the road by myself, with everything life would throw my way. There were days where the road seemed endless, or too steep, or the falls were too unbearable to get back up. I faced heartbreak, injuries, setback. I went into a deep depression. And these voices began to materialize in my head and fill me with self-doubt and question my very purpose of being on this earth. Has anyone ever felt the same? Have you ever then had to go off on a whim to try and figure things out in that harsh environment by yourself? To dig really deep, to find and obtain the strength and courage that maybe you didn't know you had. Most of us have certainly been there before, and it's not easy, right? But I found there was something beautiful about falling over. Grandpa teaching me how to ride the bike transcended into the preparation of life, whereby he gave me the skills and the wisdom to navigate the road on my own, to rise in the face of adversity and face it head on, even when he wasn't there. Right now, there is a generation of young Australians who have been starved of this stewardship, And they're riding down the road that is far more difficult than what it needs to be. We look at the statistics. In 2025, 40% of Australians between the ages of 16 and 30 have been diagnosed with a mental health disorder. A decade ago, it was 20%. How is it that it's almost doubled? I don't have the answers to those questions, but I can help comprehend what it means on a personal, granular level. It's a 17-year-old female who has lost her voice through crippling anxiety and now has to face her abusive boyfriend. It's the 21-year-old male who meets the threshold for depression, but thinks he's bad at coping at life and has had to resort to using illicit drugs. Or it's the 30-year-old female who's almost waited 6 weeks to see a psychologist. And in that time frame, she's unfortunately taken her own life. These examples are of real people. And there could be any one of us in this room. A loved one, a family member, a friend. Does it ring any bells? Society talks about resilience like it's some sort of trait. You have it or you don't. But in my experience, I don't think this is the case at all. I think resiliency is taught. It's modelled around our behaviours and our values, and it's passed down like a well-worn bike from one generation to the next. And when that chain is broken, the road or life does become more dangerous and lonely. But legacy, it does and has found a way of making its way back around. A few months ago, I stood at the very edge of that driveway again, obviously not as a child anymore, but as a steward. And my 9-year-old niece, bright-eyed, full of energy, she stood next to her bluey bike. Her helmet was crooked, her knees were already scraped from the day's event. She looked at me the same way I once looked at him, with hope and trust. But deep down, there was this silent plea for help. And without even meaning to, I heard myself say the exact same words my grandpa once said to me. It's going to be okay. And if not, I will always, always be there for you. I reflect on this moment quite a bit, because not only does it hit me with this tinge of nostalgia, but it highlights something so profound about humanity. And that is the role or the road we ride will change, but the role we play in someone else's life remains timeless. And so I held the back of his seat, just as he did. After a couple of steps, I gently guided her on her way. And as she pedaled forward, wobbly and unsure, but almost certain she was going to take over the world one day, I couldn't help at that moment remind me of myself. And behind that, the admiration from my grandpa up above that his legacy was being passed down. So tonight, I ask one important question of you. Whose seat will you hold whilst they learn to ride their bike down the road of life? Because there is a generation of young Australians who need our help. We cannot afford to be passive bystanders. If we want to inflict positive change, we must become active stewards. Not tomorrow, not the next day, not the day after that, but right here, right now, in this very room. Let's be the ones that come together. Let's be the ones that hold the seat for others. Because when we have a collective of momentum, we can change the very fabric of our future. Let's be the ones that ride together and let this be our legacy down the road.